America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, January 8th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Neil Kraus, professor of political science at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, author of The Fantasy Economy, Neoliberalism, Inequality, and the Education Reform Movement. Also on the program today, Israel strikes Hezbollah commander in South Lebanon as it continues to try and expand its war. At least 23,000 killed in Gaza. That is the most conservative number. Also, conservatively speaking, 79 confirmed journalists dead, as well as many more of their families. Meanwhile, Congress strikes a deal to avert a government shutdown. We'll see if that holds up. The Senate honing in on a supplemental war funding bill, including Ukraine and Israel, as Democrats look to become more anti-immigrant to close the deal. Republican leadership setting the stage for more electoral denialism, both in the past and the future. Supreme Court to intervene in an Idaho case in which it was ruled doctors at Medicare servicing hospitals are allowed to do more emergency abortions. U.S. Secretary of Defense apparently goes AWOL, but just briefly. Wayne LaPierre resigns from the NRA, and Lauren Boebert being investigated in a domestic violence call.
Ay, ay, ay. She's had a busy few months on the town.
All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. It is
Fun Day Monday.
Fun Day Monday.
Hello.
Emma Vigland coming through with the catchphrase of the day.
Oh, yes.
There you go. Fun Day Monday. We got a lot to get to. Of course, over the weekend was January 6th, and the anniversary of January 6th. And it has gotten more attention, I feel like, this go-round than in the past couple of years, specifically the anniversary, in part because the Republican Party and people who are supportive of the Republican Party need to revise the interpretation of January 6th, both so that it is less of a liability in the coming election, and I would suggest so that it is they have access to the same type of tools in the event that they lose the election at the end of this year.
Yeah, you might need to actually steal one again.
And Republican polling, I think we said this the other day, shows that Republicans have softened on their perspective of what happened on January 6th. Now, all you need to do is go back to January 6th and January 7th of 2021 and read what Republican lawmakers were saying at the time. Mitch McConnell was practically calling for some type of treason trial of Donald Trump. You had many Republican congresspeople who were terrified. And I don't know that I blame them. Certainly Democratic, all the politicians, I would have been
Yeah, I blame them for what they did afterwards.
But they were articulating that they were terrified in those days or two, and then they realized, like, oh, wait a second. Our voters are lunatics, and they had no problem with this. There is new footage still coming out from that day. I think in part maybe because some documentary filmmakers, maybe some of the actual rioters themselves, have waited to release this footage. Maybe they've monetized it. I don't know. But this is footage of a Troy Nels. He is a Capitol rioter. Rioter.
Yeah.
Is that who it is? Who is this guy?
The Capitol rioter is Damon Beckley. Nels is Texas 22nd Congressional District Representative.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. So Nels is a representative. You will see him through the glass, right? This is that shot. Through the glass that has been broken into the doors of the congressional floor, essentially the House floor. And you will see the Republican congressman. You can tell it's him because even though he's masking, it is a mask of the Texas flag.
Yes. And
you can hear the range of rioters who range from completely deranged to like, hey, we're just doing this. And, why are you being so difficult? And then you can also hear like the intentions they have. In the meantime, you're also going to see Capitol security guards with their guns drawn, basically, making sure that they don't see a gun peep through this glass door. It's pretty intense footage.
In hindsight, it's incredible that more people were not killed by Capitol Police.
It is shocking.
We're sick of this, and we're making it knowing that we're sick of it. Okay?
30 years.
Would you? Huh?
And I've never had people like this.
Say again?
I've been in law enforcement in Texas for 30 years.
Talk a little louder. That's because you've never seen corruption like we have seen this last month.
I'm ashamed.
And I'm ashamed of my Congress people. They don't even stand up for it. They're giving away my grandchildren and your grandchildren's freedom.
What? Hey, you need to back up.
Freedom is at hand. Go find another door, everybody.
Do you understand we're fighting for you?
Yeah, I ought to put the guns down. We're not going to do anything. That's dumb.
The Constitution,
Breathe. Hey guys, you gotta breathe.
You guys could get the same paycheck when the government gets replaced with real governors.
Yeah.
A good. This is not gonna.
I mean, it goes on. There's more. Do we have the longer version even? Like, because what I find really fascinating about this is you hear like these different things. You should put the guns down. We're not going to do anything except for get rid of you socialist pigs.
Yeah. There's also other
There's
clips.
a wide range of people. Yeah. Here.
Oh, this is the other one.
Here we go.
You can hear them and some of the conspiracy theories you might have become familiar with that the right espouses and these kinds of folks were.
And ostensibly they're doing this because of the corruption that has taken place over the prior month. Now, look, I mean, listen, I accept the possibility that a lot of these people are simply deranged and there's a whole class of them. But what is quite evident is that these people were manipulated on some level to do this as part of a much bigger scheme. We know, and I don't know why we didn't hear more about it, frankly. I mean, it was reported, but you don't hear much about it. When the application was put in for the rally that Donald Trump spoke at, they were explicit about not having plans to march on the Capitol. Multiple times they were asked by the Parks Service, people who are taking the application. Multiple times they were asked. And now it was revealed through, I think it was an investigation by the Parks Department with access to private texts that those people applying for the application, not only were knowingly, explicitly lying, they were also, they knew that the president was going to call for an assault on the Capitol, a march on the Capitol, whatever you want to call it. And they knew that he needed plausible deniability. I mean, they articulated as much in these things. And so there was clearly a plan to use these people. And why, why would they be lying about it? Why would this group that is applying for the application have advanced knowledge of it if there wasn't a plan? Now, people can go on and on about well, Donald Trump's an idiot, and these people are idiots, and these other people are idiots, and their plan didn't work.
Incapable of intentionality.
Yeah, but the idea that they didn't, and they weren't successful, and again, let's remember, they were a Mike Pence away from being successful, and Mike Pence was still taking meetings that entire week. He was begging Dan Quayle, give me a reason to do this. He desperately wanted to do it.
I mean, this was Proud Boys stand back and stand by. Donald Trump essentially knows how to, and I think he gets off on it, the idea of having power over these supporters who are fanatical towards him. And we know that there was coordination, at least in part, with kind of the foot soldiers, the Roger Stone types, and people within the administration. And who do you think that those dirty scoundrels like Stone are communicating with? The base of the party, the crazies who were organizing this. It seems quite clear.
I can play this. I mean, so you can hear the range of sort of of ideas as to what they're doing there.
Language warning on this one too.
You guys are not going to lose a paycheck if we come in the building, man. And nobody's. You guys are not going to lose a paycheck if we come in the building, man. And nobody's going to get hurt. But you can only kill so many of us. Now come on with that shit, man. We don't want nobody killed.
We don't want. This is our house. We paid for it. Why don't you get that? You know it's true. I'm fighting for my son and my grandchildren. Yours too. What is wrong with you? There ain't enough pain in this world to take out your children unless you're one of the pedophiles in this fucking Congress. You one of them too? Fucking pedophiles. We know about your pedophilia.
These guys.
All right, pause it. I just want to say, the within 20 seconds, we're not going to hurt you, and then you hear someone screaming, "You effing pedophiles!"
And they say you can only kill so many of us, which kind of flies in the face of the narrative that trickled out from some Republicans a month later that this was just a tour of the Capitol.
You know what's also interesting about the tour? They seem to have broken the glass into the. No, let's keep playing it. They seem to have broken the glass into. That's one of the features of the tour.
If this was not an insurrection attempt and they were just going to die there because they were dying to see the Capitol Rotunda, I mean, give me a break.
Come on, man. Listen, these are good people. Look, brother, they're trying to do their job. No, I don't want to get shot, man. Really. Please. We want to do our part. We want. What are you doing? Hey, what's your name? We just want our grievances redressed, like the Constitution says. That's all. That's all. And we know we'll have no homes to go home to. Look, man, this government's cost my family $400 grand, dude. I'm in the poorhouse over this stuff. Dude, you don't know what it's like to just about be on the fucking street, man. It sucks. It's not cool to go to bed hungry. It sucks a lot, man.
Texas is one of the greatest states in this country.
What's that? All right, this is where we stay. I'm in the house. We just want to check some shit out.
We own this house, not you.
I can't do anything right now.
Our house. You just fucking work for us. Your time is being fired now. You're doing a shit-ass job.
I'm 52, man. I got a 9-year-old. He deserves to grow up with a government that treats him right. And a 16-year-old and a 22-year-old, man. Hey, I'll call you back, okay?
Somebody's on their phone with somebody.
To get here and stood in the cold for 3.5 hours to find out that Mike Pence is a fucking traitor, man. No. And I voted for that fucking dude.
We've got to American citizens.
Okay, now there's a lot of things that people could suggest that they voted for their representative to do, and crashing through Congress and basically sitting there threatening the Congress people in such a way that people have to draw their guns to protect it is pretty stunning. And
you should be home with your 9-month-old kid, I would also say.
9-year-old.
9-year-old.
Oh, okay. Well, probably home with him too.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating to see the images of this, and also the real genuine attempts to pretend that this was somehow part of the constitutional order. And, I've heard people try and say this is the equivalent of Black Lives Matter protests. Black Lives Matter protests did not attempt to usurp the Constitution of the United States, which is exactly what was going on there, the practice of the Constitution of the United States. Now, I'm not, I'm not a West Wing watcher. But the fact of the matter is that it is the idea of a peaceful transition to power is pretty important.
Yeah.
And I have no problem with all of the court cases that the Trump administration attempt to file. Certain instances, it was obviously stuff that was slanderous that guys like Rudy Giuliani did. But you can tie it up in the courts. But this is extrajudicial. There's just no two ways around it. This isn't protest.
Yeah.
This is literally part of a plan to change the operations that were going on inside inside the House and inside the Senate chambers. That's what the idea was. That is just one facet of the plan. That was just sort of like the hammer while, Ron Johnson was trying to corral fake electors. And here is Representative Elise Stefanik. She is a member of the Republican leadership. Listen to how now she's talking about this.
Being the weaponization of the federal government.
Do you back to this key question? Do you still think it was a tragic day? Do you think that the people who stormed the Capitol should be held responsible to the full extent of the law?
I have concerns about the treatment of January 6 hostages. I have concerns. We have a role in Congress of oversight over our treatments of prisoners. And I believe that we're seeing the weaponization of the federal government against not just President Trump, but we're seeing it against conservatives. We're seeing it against Catholics. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud to serve on the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Government, because the American people want answers. They want transparency, and they understand that as you look across this country, there seems to be two sets of rules. If your last name is Clinton or it's Biden, you get to live by a different set of rules than if you're an everyday patriotic American. I've been clear, Kristen, if you go back and play the full speech I gave on the House floor, I condemn the violence, just like I condemn the violence of the BLM riots, but I also importantly stood for election integrity and security of our elections, which if we don't have that, we do not have a democracy. So the real threat to our democracy is these
Jesus, will you interrupt her for God's sakes? She called them hostages.
Tish James or whether
now you can, I mean, if Elise Stefanik was a huge carceral reform advocate, I could understand that maybe she would be using hyperbole, but she doesn't give a crap about carceral reform. The idea that these people are hostages is nuts. And the idea that Meet the Press allowed that to just go by without having to explain, what do you mean hostages?
No, she's just deploying the usage of like the same tactics she was using to smear those college presidents with like her accusations about she's trying to invoke, I don't know, some sort of like Israel parallel. I'm not exactly sure.
Well, that's true. From a messaging standpoint, but there's another part of the message, which is these people have not even been convicted in courts of law. They have just been taken hostage.
And Welker does not follow up with that.
Not at all. It's unbelievable.
Her follow-up is, you really think Biden gets a free pass when his son's been indicted?
It's unbelievable. I mean, interrupt her, for God's sakes.
As somebody who was weaponizing the government to, for instance, like the demagogue college presidents, like she's actively doing that, and you says, well, we can't have that happen. I mean, yeah.
If only NBC had access to, an interviewer who would ask maybe a follow-up question that was relevant.
Oh, whoops.
Incidentally, Mehdi Hassan left MSNBC.
Got fired.
Yes. A couple of words from our sponsors, and then we'll be talking to Neil Kraus, professor of political science at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, author, The Fantasy Economy, Neoliberalism, Inequality, and the Education Reform Movement. Great to have these guys back as a sponsor. I've been eating Magic Spoon cereal and giving it to my kids for 5 years now. Magic Spoon is basically reinvented your favorite childhood cereals. They taste great, but here is the big sort of like a core brand proposition. Each serving contains 0 grams of sugar, also 13 to 14 grams of protein, and 4 to 5 grams of net carbs per serving. It doesn't have all that junk that you don't want to eat when you eat cereal. It's keto friendly. It's wholesome. It's gluten free. It's grain free. It's soy free. And it is 140 calories per serving. They got a bunch of different flavors. Longtime listeners will recall my favorites are cocoa and peanut butter. And also cinnamon, which they now call cinnamon roll. But they have fruity, frosted, blueberry muffin, maple waffle, honey nut, birthday cake, chocolate chip cookie. And now Magic Spoon also offers what they call treats. They are perfect on-the-go snacks. They're just like those like marshmallow treats you had as a kid, except for the difference is 1 gram of sugar, 1 to 2 grams of net carbs, and they are packed with 11 grams of protein per bar. They come in 2 different flavors, marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter, and you can get mix and match like a little combo pack. These are great, obviously, for yourself as a little pick-me-up, but also great for your kids. Again, 1 gram of sugar. That's my big thing now. I'm becoming like very, very anti-sugar.
Not good for you.
Well, I've always been anti-sugar, except for I go crazy. That's the only problem I have.
Oh, yeah, those
You have
sweets
to
are
be
gone.
Yeah, okay. All right, I have a little bit of a problem with it. Anyways, head to magicspoon.com. The cereal helps me out. So I get my cravings, and that's the way I get rid of it. Head to magicspoon.com/Majority Report. Grab a custom bundle of cereal. Try the magic for yourself. And don't forget to add their delicious treats for on the go. Be sure to use our promo code Majority Report at checkout. You will save $5 off your order. Magic Spoon's so confident in their product, they are backed by a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember, start the new year off right with a delicious bowl of high-protein cereal at magicspoon.com/Majority Report. Use the code Majority Report to save $5 off. Thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this episode. And my breakfast, at least, I don't know, half the time. Another sponsor for today's program. Sleep is incredibly important. Everybody knows that. You look better, you feel better, you have energy to spare. Actually, it's associated with keeping your weight in check. New Year's, people really focus on getting better sleep. Well, I've got a tip for you. That is Cozy Earth bedding. Why? Temperature regulation, ladies and gentlemen. For people like myself who do not like to feel like I'm getting too hot or too cold or too anything for that matter, Cozy Earth bedding. Cozy Earth sponsoring the show today, and they're offering you up to 35% off at CozyEarth.com. Enter Majority Report at checkout. Cozy Earth, you've heard me talk about this. Emma's got a duvet, right?
Yeah, I do.
I got the sheets, the pillowcases, the whole 9 yards. Plus, I also actually have the loungewear. The joggers are amazing. And the bedding is made with viscose, which is from bamboo. And I don't know how it works. You would think bamboo, that doesn't seem soft because we all know it and like it. But when you get down to the tiny threads, incredibly soft. They also soften more the more you wash them, of course. But they are temperature regulating. Cozy Earth was founded to transform lives by offering the softest, most luxurious, and because it is bamboo, the most responsibly sourced bedding in the world. Bamboo grows like a weed because it is a weed.
Yes.
Cozy Earth is the brand that made Oprah's favorite things 5 years in a row. Cozy Earth bedding, again, ethically sourced using premium viscose from highly sustainable bamboo. It's a weed. Cozy Earth bedding is naturally temperature regulating. It is breathable, so you're going to sleep more easy and more comfortable all year round. And here's the thing about Cozy Earth bedding. It comes with a 100-night sleep trial. So you have 100 nights to sleep on them, wash them, try them out. And if you're not completely in love with them, just return them within 100 days for a full refund. All of their products include a 10-year warranty against defects. Doesn't matter. Again, luxury bedding, they're ultra comfortable loungewear. They got plush bath towels. They got more. Check it out. Cozy Earth. It's going to make your new year cozier. If you've never tried Cozy Earth, I've got awesome news. You can save up to 35% off Cozy Earth right now. But hurry, this will not last. Go to CozyEarth.com. Enter my promo code Majority Report. That is CozyEarth.com. Promo code Majority Report at checkout. 35% off your first order. CozyEarth.com. Promo code Majority Report. Check it out. CozyEarth.com. We'll put the links in the podcast and YouTube description. Quick break, and we'll be right back with Neil Kraus, professor of political science at University of Wisconsin, author of The Fantasy Economy. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome with Emma Vigeland, Neil Kraus, professor of political science at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls, author of The Fantasy Economy, Neoliberalism, Inequality, and the Education Reform Movement. Neil, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much for having me.
These are three things that we love to talk about here on the show, and you've got them all together in the. But let's start with the fantasy that sure. We have been sold, and then we'll talk about sort of why it's been created.
Sure. The fantasy economy is basically a misleading version of the economy and the education system in the interests of corporations and the wealthy. I trace it to the 1980s primarily. The Reagan administration really plays a significant role in the book, but over the decades, it's sort of been ramped up, and now in higher education, it's kind of like the air we breathe. There's sort of two overarching claims. One is the education system is always failing, and two, that the workforce is always inadequate. It's never good enough, right? And these two claims are just repeated endlessly by corporations, by foundations, by education reformers, and to the point where it's pretty much all we hear. For a long time, it was really directed at K-12, like the Reagan folks and Nation at Risk and all that stuff. But then since the Great Recession, it's really the pressure's been ratcheted up against higher ed. So, if you ask anybody who works in higher ed, I mean, they will tell you that this is all we hear, that we're letting the public down, that the public has lost faith in us, that our graduates don't have the right skills, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how I see it. Yeah.
So to be specific, what we're talking about is when the economy is not working for people, and when we have raised unemployment in particular, it has been a function of mismatched skill sets and having to retrain or to make our is this created to protect the economy, or is it created to essentially attack our system of education, largely public education, even if we're talking about higher ed?
More so the latter, but because really it's been the foundation of the whole education reform movement. I mean, if you convince pretty much everybody involved, I mean, much of this is targeted at the education establishment, targeted at the media. The notion that, the schools are failing, higher ed is failing. But what I argue in the book that it's much, much bigger than that. It was really a mythical account of the economy, of the labor market, that was kind of, created in order to impose a very unpopular neoliberal order. I mean, if you think about, I grew up in upstate New York. I'm from Syracuse, and I lived in Buffalo. I went to grad school in Albany, and I grew up during the 80s when, industry was just going away almost weekly, right? If you think about what's happening, right, industry is basically going overseas. Unions are under a constant assault. And what I argue in the book is that really starting with the Reagan folks, the policymakers and business interests and eventually foundations start to say, well, the real problem here is that the education system is failing. That's why industry is leaving. That's why wages are stagnant. That's why unemployment, 30 years ago was 8, 9, 10%, right? That's why you haven't gotten a raise in X number of years. It has nothing to do with business, right? It has nothing to do with the economy. It has everything to do with education. So I think that's really the primary motivation, because you can't go to Syracuse, where I grew up, in 1985 and give a speech and say, guess what? We're going to ship all your jobs overseas. We're going to fight all minimum wage increases. We're going to do everything we can to destroy labor unions. Vote for us. I mean, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So what really the Reagan folks and the business community kind of march lockstep, and they say, well, there's all these jobs that require a high level of skill. And so it's up to the education system to really, shape people's livelihoods. And so since that time, the entire discussion of economic opportunity in the United States, the entire mainstream discussion, has been solely focused on the education system. And that's right up until the present day. So now it's up to us. It's up to higher ed, right? To basically, give people middle-class security and all the rest of it. And, what I argue in the book throughout is that we can't do that. The education system can't create jobs. It can't give people raises. It can't do any of those things. We educate, and we put students out into the world, and some do really well, others don't. And who gets blamed? We get blamed. Higher ed gets blamed. That's how the politics of the fantasy economy work. Always, always, always put it back on the education system and deflect away from, business and policymakers and institutions and basically anything else. It's always up to the education system. And that's why we're seen as chronically failing, because we've been assigned something that we can't do. Right?
I mean, there's an analog. I mean, you write, largely about higher ed, but there's an analog with K through 12 too, in the sense that it's supposed to, K through 12 is supposed to supersede our poverty and social ills. Right. Instead of addressing those directly, it is about the education. The elementary schools are failing, rather than look at, well, the real problem is before the kids get to the front door, essentially, because everything is written in stone. I mean, largely written in stone, maybe a slight exaggeration, but certainly incredibly predictable based upon what the social situation is and economic situation is of those kids.
Yeah, and what I discovered during the course of the research is really, in the 70s and into the 80s, there was still kind of a mainstream debate about, can we, on one side, was, well, schools can't overcome poverty. Right? They can't overcome the hardships of poverty. That was a mainstream position that had a lot of defenders in much of conventional debate. But then the other side has always been, well, no, it's really about the schools. It's about the teachers. And if we just fix the schools and had higher standards and all the rest of it, then all children can learn and all these sorts of things that, on the surface, you can't. Who can object to that, right? Who could disagree with that? But the former argument kind of lost in political terms, right? And the argument that the schools could somehow magically overcome poverty, even though it really doesn't square with common sense, I think, kind of won in policy circles, right? That no, we have to hold everybody to high standards, right? And if we're not trying to educate, the lowest income students to the best of our ability, we're abdicating our responsibility and so forth. But the fact is, as you point out, I mean, the schools can overcome poverty and the hardship that accompanies it, and kids who come from low income households and are food insecure households and move quite frequently, because that's what happens with lower income students. They move oftentimes, new schools, change teachers and all the rest of it. But yet schools are somehow magically supposed to overcome all that stuff and then fix it. And by the time they graduate, these students will be ready to go to college. It's really kind of a denial of the whole, context of what poverty is, I think.
And so is this I want just so we can move past the genesis. It feels like there's a quality to this, to quote Paul Wolfowitz, when he was talking about the weapons of mass destruction, it was the one thing we could all agree on. Because on one hand, it is education is blamed. Our poor education is blamed to basically cover up for decisions that we make as a society within our economy. We're going to allow companies to leave. We're going to disempower unions. We're going to not raise the minimum wage. We're going to, not tax wealthy people and redistribute the wealth. Whatever, all these political decisions we make, they instead of having an awareness that we're making these political decisions, we blame the failure of the economy not working for everybody on education. At the same time, there is a very healthy anti-public education, or public school, I should say, movement in this country, which is also joined by both like very religious people and by people who just don't, I think there's some racist foundation for it. Public education is a function of Reconstruction and is a way to address sort of inequalities that came about via slavery in many respects. There's that assault. So it's almost like education is being attacked from both sides.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's different, kind of wings here to the education reform movement. They're kind of the libertarian interests that you're talking about that are very hostile to the whole concept of public education. And they've pushed, school vouchers for decades, and austerity in higher ed, is sort of a priority. But then there's sort of, what I would call neoliberal foundations that are less opposed necessarily to at least ostensibly to public education, but are always criticizing it. They and basically, trying to reform it. Charter schools are seen as kind of a solution, according to, a lot of folks in that camp. But at the end of the day, they share a very common set of policy goals and interests: hostility to organized labor, and basically just a support of what we would call sort of the neoliberal consensus, and basically a desire to kind of put the whole thing on the schools. So there are important differences. You're right. I mean, and there's a lot of very hostile forces that are kind of going after public education, for sure.
Let's talk about some of those, I guess that latter group, and this was really sort of came out of the aughts, if I remember correctly, where, George Bush had no child left behind. And this notion of, the soft bigotry of low expectations that existed, and the corporate reform movement. And then we ultimately saw that with so it's the Gates Foundation and then Arnie Duncan under the Obama administration, sort of carrying this corporate reform movement forward, all of which, it seems to me, and this, I guess I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but in some respects, it feels like we are in a post-corporate education reform movement era, and arguably maybe a little bit early soon to say this, but a post-neoliberal, at least, in terms of it is not as dominant of an idea that it used to be, let's say, 5 years ago. Would you agree with take both those, because they're separate things, but maybe they go hand in hand?
So are you suggesting, like with the latter point, post neoliberal? You mean the big picture, basically? You're talking.
Yes, I'm saying in terms of an era. Certainly the corporate reform movement seems to. Education reform, K through 12. Seems to have died, and we're in sort of a post era of that. And I maybe I peg that to like the Rand Corporation saying that the Gates Foundation experiment was a disaster, et cetera, et cetera. But
I would also just maybe add another wrinkle too, which is this new focus on trade schools potentially being a part of that new. I don't know if that's what you were alluding to, Sam, at all, but
not necessarily trade schools, but just broadly speaking. I think like education is sort of like things like standardized tests and whatnot. Are we past that era? And maybe it's a good opportunity to talk about those as well.
I think there's a couple things to think about. I'm reminded, and I know you had John Shelton on the show, his book, The Education Myth. John and I talk about, are we on the verge of sort of a paradigm change here beyond neoliberalism? It's the consensus is at least being questioned a bit more. Unions are polling very high among the public, and I think people realize, hey, the last 40 years haven't gone very well for a lot of people.
Right.
I think there's all sorts of books, nonfiction authors and journalists have written these great books in the last 5 to 10 years about the last 40 years, and sort of reinterpreting a lot of it, beginning with the Reagan administration. So I think that they're the beginnings of that right now are kind of happening. Where it goes from here, I'm not quite sure, but the emphasis, I think Emma mentioned, trade schools. There's some segments of corporate America that are kind of pushing that concept quite a bit. They seem a little bit at odds with the mainstream view among reformers, and that is everybody has to get a college degree. That's still really, post high school education. This is what I talk about in the book throughout. That is still the larger goal of most, not all, but most education reformers is that in order to move ahead, you really have to go, to school beyond high school and get a degree or whatever.
That's why I brought up trade schools, right? Which is perhaps we're in this era of, when you're the myth of education essentially solving for poverty and all these societal ills that the government needs to be involved in. There's this kind of renewed focus on education as a funnel into economic usefulness under capitalism, and somebody that can be a pliant worker or somebody that's going to provide value, as opposed to the more holistic, enriching elements of that. And I feel like even though trade schools obviously are a good thing, that kind of new, let's move towards this being the goal of higher education is a bit of an extension of, that kind of myth that you describe.
Yeah, absolutely. Higher ed is as we speak all around the country, being turned more and more into, we have to adopt more STEM programs, even though there's very few STEM jobs. And that's not top secret. It's not like I'm the first person to write about that. This is not like confidential information, the nature of the labor market. And this is why I wrote the book. I started looking up all this official labor market data, and I'm like, wait a minute now. The economy is dominated by low education, low skill, low wage jobs. And we can't change that. The education system can't change that. No matter how many people we crank out, we can't change that. And yet we're blamed for people's economic problems. But yeah, I mean, around the country right now, I mean, I work in the University of Wisconsin system. There are many states that have state surpluses, right? West Virginia University got a lot of attention recently in the national press. West Virginia is a state with a state surplus, and what's happening? They're basically gutting the flagship university there. Not even, there's not even a possibility of using a state surplus to sort of shore up, as Emma was talking about, sort of a, broad-based education, because it's been narrowed to the point where, pretty much the whole discussion is basically you go to college to get a job, end of story. Mm-hmm. And higher ed doesn't do we're a huge part of the problem. And one of the things I keep talking about is higher ed has to talk about higher ed differently. We have to talk about the purposes of education differently. Because basically what higher ed does, for the most part, almost entirely, is just echo the language of workforce development and all this kind of stuff. And that just feeds into this larger narrative that the education system is responsible for your livelihood. So we have to fix the education system, not the larger economy.
Can we figure out how? Can you walk us through how that gets unraveled? Because it seems to me that this whole notion of selling higher ed as a tool to as a vocational tool is really entrenched. Like it has become like so enmeshed with the mission of these institutions, both private and public. And there's been this sort of race to the bottom in terms of like what an education is supposed to do, like as opposed, like very narrowly tailored, but this also sort of this arms race as to like, because it is strictly the output is to sort of create a more to make someone more rich, essentially. Yeah. Right. Yeah. That what the universities have been pursuing are sort of like consumer benefits to, while you get yourself in a position to get a better job. Do you follow what I'm saying in terms of like where the investments are going are less in sort of the wide range of educational opportunities and more in what's going to pay off?
Yeah, and that's what higher ed markets. Those, we market programs that we think will draw more students, that we think will give students a better economic opportunity. But the thing is, you can't create more jobs for engineers or anybody else by graduating more engineering majors. That's not how things work, right? And yet we operate on this very flawed assumption. I'll defend higher ed for a minute. I mean, why do we do all this? Because this, what I call the fantasy economy, and this is all we have heard. I mean, all we hear, right, within higher ed, is that we are blowing it. That our graduates are not skilled enough, that if you see one of your graduates working at Target, it's because we failed. It's not because of structural realities in the economy, right? And that's why, we're just stuck in this paradigm that really is incredibly misleading about the nature of the labor market, and has given higher ed this responsibility that at the end of the day, we can't fulfill. And so what happens over a period of decades is the public, understandably, blames us. They blame, if you're 30 or 35 or 40 and you don't like your and you have a degree and you're working in a job that doesn't pay you much, where does conventional wisdom go? Well, you went to the wrong school, or you majored in the wrong thing, or maybe, and we don't want to say this out loud too often, maybe it's something about you, right? It's not about, well, are there enough jobs for college graduates? And the answer is no. It's not about, well, a lot of jobs for college graduates have had stagnant wages for decades. It's not about that. No, we don't want to talk about that and the forces that create that, the policies that create that. We want to talk about your local English department and how it's blowing it, right? But wait, better yet, let's get rid of English. Let's add more STEM. I mean, that's pretty much the debate on every campus. Well, with the exception of elite schools and flagships, they're sort of above the fray. But the rest of us, which is by far the majority, are very much in the fray. And we're getting our budgets cut when our states have record state surpluses because the public has basically blamed us because that's what they've been told to do, to blame higher ed if you're not in a good place at age 30 or 35 with your 4-year degree. Because we make them a promise, right? We make students a promise that we can't deliver. We can't deliver middle-class security to everybody with a degree. We can't create jobs for graduates, but somehow magically we're supposed to do that, right? But because of the strength of all these myths, this is why we're getting killed politically. This is why.
But who's the we here? Because it seems to me that, largely, I mean, it is the forces that would obscure the fact that that we have a political economy as opposed to an economy. I mean, who is we being essentially citizens?
In that reference, I meant we being higher education itself, but also, I mean, you could say citizens as well. I mean, most students go to public institutions. Over 70% of students go to public institutions. So, when austerity is implemented over a period of decades and public higher ed becomes tuition driven, who gets blamed for the student loan crisis? Your local English department does, right? and not the state legislature, which has 1 year at a time scaled back its contribution and basically compelled students to borrow $50,000 and $60,000 and $70,000 for a 4-year degree from a public university today.
Have you? Do you know of a definitive piece? I mean, my sense is that really this has been the story of the incredible inflation we've seen in higher education. That there's been upward pressure because low-cost public institutions that cost virtually nothing or nothing 40 or 50 years ago. Right. Now, as their cost goes up, private institutions also just, have basically are off to the races in terms of how far up they can raise their tuition. What's the most definitive, sort of reckoning of that?
Reckoning meaning what?
Just recording of it. I mean, analysis of it, if you're aware of one.
That's a great question. I mean, there are snippets really all over the place. I can't give you a citation off the top of my head. I just know that, that it has happened over a period of decades. And rather than, typically rather than look at carefully why it's happened and look at why are we implementing austerity when we have all this fiscal prosperity in higher ed, we debate all kinds of things on campuses that really, and by the way, I think I'm not at all suggesting that higher ed spends money in a way that I would agree with, because that's not the case. I mean, we never turn down consultants. We can't turn down consultants. We can't not buy software. We have to purchase every software product because they're all game changers, even though the game never changes. And so I'm not suggesting at all that higher ed is doing everything correctly. I mean, it's not. But the fact is that over all these years, when the states have scaled back their contribution, it's on students, and they end up borrowing more and more. But wages aren't going up. So their standard of living is going to suffer.
How has this argument changed? Like, we're living in an era now where it has become, for many years, we were told that there is a natural rate of unemployment that the economy could not sustain an unemployment rate below, I don't know, at one point it was like 6%.
Yeah, I think I was going to say 5, but yeah, something like that.
And 5%. And now, and it's clear that is not the case. Like we've learned that the sort of iron laws of economics that we were told was like more permanent than meteorology, I guess. Are not the case. How has that had any created? Because theoretically, right, if we're down at 3% unemployment, then we should be trumpeting the success of our education system theoretically. But of course, it has nothing to do with that. But what has it changed the tenor of the debate at all?
That's interesting because, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and unemployment quite regularly was 7, 8, 9%, 10%, right? It fluctuated. And that was always the biggest indicator, right? That was the lead story when the new numbers came out was the unemployment rate. Now, if you think about it, the jobs report, the top line is the story, right? Came out last week, 220 or 240,000 jobs or whatever. Right. And then the second or third line is like, unemployment's 3.3% or something. We have, I don't know what's going on. I think that the economics has yet to catch up with the fact that the unemployment rate doesn't appear to be much of an indicator anymore. There are tons of jobs. And most people seeking work have them. That results in a very low unemployment rate. But that's not translating into improving lots of people's standard of living. It's just not, and I think that's a pretty significant story too, how the unemployment rate itself doesn't appear to be nearly the indicator that it was 30 and 40 years ago.
It sort of feels like nobody's attempting to address that question whatsoever in our politics.
I would agree. And President Biden and his people, have to acknowledge that yes, the unemployment rate is low, but lots of folks aren't benefiting from that. Several decades ago, the president's reelection, whoever it was, depended on the unemployment rate largely. And if it was really low, if it went down, the president incumbent would maybe get reelected, and if it went up, and the opposite would happen. That isn't how things work, these days. And to the extent that we're focusing on that and not on wages and, people's income, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. It's not really helping the debate, in my opinion.
Neil Kraus, professor of political science, University of Wisconsin, River Falls. The book is The Fantasy Economy, Neoliberalism, Inequality, and the Education Reform Movement. We'll put a link to that in our podcast and YouTube description and at majority.fm. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks. We're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program.
Yes.
Wherein we will play some clips, have some fun, maybe take some phone calls.
All that good stuff.
Read some IMs. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you also get the fun half. And occasionally you get a little, I don't know, we could throw a bonus. It happens once or twice a year. I don't know what the bonus, 10% off the merch, right? In the lead up to, speaking of merch, shop.majorityreportradio.com, I believe, is the merchandise store. Check out the Discord, majoritydiscord.com. And of course, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. It is not coffee or tea. It's just coffee.
Yeah.
There's no tea. Right. But there is hot chocolate.
Yes.
And there's the Majority Report blend. But, it's 2024. I got to get back into the flow of things. ESPN.
Yes. So with Bradley out, we're getting a little creative. I'll do a little stream myself today just to give a recap.
Are you saying Bradley's inhibiting your creativity?
A little bit. I mean, I'll take that up with him when he returns. But one Matt Leck will be with us on Thursday, where we'll have a regular show. So I'll do a quick stream this afternoon, recap what we saw on Sunday. It's also Black Monday, so lots of firings happening in the NFL ahead of the playoffs, and then on Thursday we'll have like a full-on show. Although I will say,
it's funny how I'm pretty into sports.
Yeah.
Like I listen to like Bill Simmons even still.
You've never heard of
you have
Black
terminology that like I've never.
It's basically the Monday after the final NFL Sunday is when all the guys get fired. And the first one happened at 12:01 a.m. They fired Arthur Blank. Like just not Arthur Blank, Arthur Smith. For Arthur Blank fired him from the Falcons. So like that kind of stuff is what goes down. I'll recap all of that myself. And then on Thursday, we'll have Matt on. Maybe we'll talk a little basketball, because now that the Knicks have won 4 straight since they traded for Anunoby, I'm a little bit back on my NBA kick early before the NFL season is over. So we're going to the finals.
It's funny how that works.
Yep.
Just can't talk
Who's
at
going
all.
to the finals?
No, I'm joking. The Knicks are not going to the finals. But they look good right now.
Can't get Emma to engage in any conversation when the Timberwolves are number 1 team in the West, and then the Knicks win 4 games.
Oh yeah, and I just want to taunt him. Yeah.
Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We did a Sunday show where I got into South Dakota, which hosts the number 1 rural health systems in the country, Sanford Health, and also has the lowest nurse pay of any state. It's actually ranked number 51 because DC is included in the rankings. It's only ahead of Puerto Rico. So we get into that. Kristi Noem recently did a commercial where she dressed up as a nurse to say, we had huge shortages, but you should come to South Dakota because we don't do income tax. And it's like, well, the income is very low there for a nurse, so maybe that's not the problem.
It's not going to be the issue.
Yeah, so check that out. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning. We've got Sudip Bhattacharya talking about socialism and Asian American politics tomorrow. Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
All right, we will see you in the fun half. I think we'll take some phone calls. We'll see when we do. 646-257-3920. When we do take your calls, see you in a moment.
3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow.
What? What is that going on?
It's nuts.
Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt.
What is up, everyone? Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? Is it?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello? Is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single frickin' day. What's on your mind?
Sports.
We can discuss free markets and we can discuss capitalism.
I'm going to go throw up.
Who libertarians? They're so stupid, though.
Common sense says, of course.
gobbledygook.
We fucking nailed him!
So what's 79 plus 21?
Challenge met.
I'm positively quivering.
I believe 96, I want to say.
857-210-3501. 1 half. 3 8s.
9/11, for instance.
$3,400, $1,900.
6, 5, 4, $3 trillion sold. It's a zero-sum game.
Actually, you're making me think less of it.
But let me say this. Poop.
You can call it satire. Sam goes, it's satire.
On top of it all, my favorite part about you is just like every day, all day, like everything you do.
Without a doubt. Hey, buddy, we see you. All right, folks.
It's just just the weak being weeded out, obviously.
Yeah, sun's out, guns out. I don't know.
But you should know.
People just don't like to entertain ideas anymore.
I have a question. Who cares?
Our chat is enabled, folks.
I love it.
I do love that.
Look, gotta jump. Gotta be quick. I gotta jump.
I'm losing it, bro.
2 o'clock. We're already late, and the guy's being a dick. So screw him. Sent to a goose.